Hello, are you here to debate?
I am here to debate.
All right, what's your name, age, and pronouns?
My name is Rat. I am 20, and my pronouns are she, her.
All right, what are you here to talk about?
So I noticed that you said pro-life is trash. What's your pro-choice position?
Sure. Pro-choice, I would say that uh, no sentient creature has an obligation to a creature who is not sentient. So therefore, because there is no obligation, I don't believe uh, you need to maintain a pregnancy over a fetus prior to 24 weeks. And after 24 weeks, you can still remove it. It would just have to be without killing it. Like you can remove it without killing it prior to 24 weeks, after 24 weeks, because at that point it will have the capacity for sentience.
What's your definition of sentience?
Subjective human experience.
Oh, okay. So, I mean, do you know, like, if there's a difference between, like, sentience and consciousness under your position?
Yeah, consciousness is going to be like self awareness, where sentience is just going to be the ability to experience things. So, for instance, like all animals would be sentient, but only some creatures would be conscious. Same with humans. All humans are sentient when they're born, we don't become conscious until like a couple weeks to a couple months later.
So, so your position is pretty much if the being is non-sentient and doesn't have a subjective experience, they are not granted rights.
Well, yeah, I wouldn't give them human rights, definitely. But yeah, they don't have moral consideration. I can still say that we may want to harm them in like less intrusive ways, but like they just don't have moral consideration, especially in comparison to the already existing sentient creature.
So if sentience is going to be your qualifier, what if there's a baby born into a coma that doesn't meet this qualifier?
They would still have the capacity. That's why I said capacity earlier. The capacity just means the
What do you
parts
mean
of the
by
brain.
capacity?
Yeah, it just means the parts of the brain needed to run sentience are there. Even if that isn't currently deployed, it has the capacity to deploy them. All we would do is when it wakes out of the coma, now it can deploy it. So that's why I worry about like whether that's why I say 24 weeks is my standpoint, because that's when all the parts needed for sentience are there.
Okay, so why does I guess like my question is like why this capacity is actually morally relevant when you could like I would just give like the hypothetical of like what's the moral distinction between a zygote that will be conscious in, like 5 months versus a baby born into a coma who will also be conscious in 5 months. Like I do see descriptively it is descriptively true that one has the capacity to actively deploy this and one doesn't. But I don't really see a moral distinction between these two humans.
Well, I would say that is the moral distinction. The moral distinction is one has the ability to experience while one does not.
Well,
So
that's
if
just
you don't
like
have the ability
descriptively
to
true.
experience, yeah, but that's the distinction. If you don't have the ability to experience, then killing you doesn't harm you because you don't have the ability to
Yeah, I don't
experience.
know. I'm just not really seeing a difference here. Like, just because one has the
You just said there
capacity
was
to
a
deploy
difference.
this. Sorry, what?
You just said there was a difference.
Yeah, well, I'm not seeing the moral distinction between these two humans.
You're not seeing the moral distinction between the two humans.
Correct.
Yeah, if the moral distinction would be when we say killing a human is wrong, why is it wrong to kill a human?
Oh, because you're depriving them of their future and you're depriving them of prospective personhood.
Yeah, I don't. Future doesn't matter,
Okay, so then why
right?
is it wrong to kill
I
humans?
don't because we're causing them to experience harm. They're experiencing some level of harm, and that loss of
What if they aren't?
experience, you would if you waited a second, you would have heard me explain the next part. That loss of experience, that negative towards that experience, that loss of that is also wrong because we know that the experience is happening, and when we lose it, we know that that's a bad thing, right? This would just be like intuitively from like how we've just evolved as people, right? It doesn't
Yeah,
matter
I mean, so
ever just saying something has a future, so it's bad. Like doesn't mean anything, right? I know the flow arguments.
no.
Flow is nonsense.
I wouldn't exactly call my position flow. It's like yes, you are depriving a human being of their future, but it's more so like I think the action of depriving a human being of their personhood when we know that it is in their nature to develop this, I think depriving a human being of like what I would define personhood to be, which is just like the being of being an individual person, and then person just being like a being with like rational or qualitative experiences. If they have this like and it's of now or in the future, I would say it's like wrong to deprive them of this thing that I value.
Why is it wrong? I'm sorry. Why is it wrong to deprive someone of a future?
Why is it wrong to deprive somebody of their future? Yeah, I just
Yeah.
can't find any other reason why it would be wrong to um, unalive another human being.
Well, I would say it's because we're limiting the current experience that they're having, right? Experience. You don't like. You can't be harmed until the experience starts. Once that experience starts, now you can experience harm in a way that's relevant, right? In a way that's actually relevant to how we exist on like a physical plane, right? Once that experience starts, ending that experience, at least non-consensually, I view as a moral negative.
Wait, I'm confused. So you're saying like depriving them of the experience of passing away?
What?
I'm confused. Can you clarify what you mean by experience?
Well, yeah, experience would just be how you interpret the world around you. No, not how you interpret the world around you, but experience is just going to be how you engage with the world around you via like this your senses or your brain or your memory or any of these other relevant things that allow you to take in what's going on and like sort of understand it in a way that connects your body to your brain.
Well, what if you don't have this? What if you're in a coma?
You still have the capacity. The only time that capacity is gone is total brain death.
Yeah. But why is it wrong to deprive you? Like, what is the wrong of unaliving you if you're in a coma?
Because you still have the capacity to experience. It's just not currently deployed.
Wait, that's not explaining why it's wrong.
Well, yeah, when I explained that the reason, okay, so I'll go through it this way. So when somebody is prior to having a coma, they are existing in the world around us, they're walking around, we know that they want to continue experiencing the world, right? When they're in a coma, that experience is just temporarily paused. Who knows how long it could be temporarily paused, but it's temporarily paused. Now, if they come out of the coma, right, we know they want to continue that experience, right? I don't think that somebody's unconsensual pause in their experience should lead to us wanting to like unalive them, right? Because we just know
Well, of
how
course not.
creatures that can experience want to interpret the world, they tend to want to stay alive.
Yeah, I mean, okay. So still, when it comes to somebody being in a coma, I would say the reason why it's wrong to do them unalive them is because you're depriving them of their future experiences.
The only reason they can have those future experiences is because they have the capacity to experience. I can't deprive
Why does
someone of
this
a future
matter?
of something they don't have.
What do you mean? What do you mean they don't have? Because like I would say the fetus has a future.
Wait, the fetus has a theoretical future until they've developed to the point where they have the capacity. You're just making assumptions. You're just assuming they will have X, Y, or Z. We don't know for
Well, as
sure.
opposed to them passing away, sure. Like
Well, that's
any
just
human
it.
could
You're
pass
you're
away.
all you're doing is you're just rephrasing the potential argument. That's all that's happening. They will potentially have a future. We don't know for sure. It's like if I have a car that doesn't have an engine in it, I can say potentially if an engine is put in this car, it will run, right? However, if I have a car with an engine in it, I will say this car currently has the capacity to run. It's just not started. I just haven't started the car yet, but it currently has the capacity to run.
When I think of future, I just think of existing. So like you're depriving them of a future, even if they don't have a subjective experience to deploy that future onto. Like they still have a future regardless.
What is existing? Because like trees have a future if we want to go down this rabbit hole, right? Like
Of course they do.
if we're gonna just say so like what's the relevant distinction then between a tree and a fetus if both have futures where it's just about existing and that future of existing is the thing that we're giving them moral consideration on. So what would be the
No.
what would be the
So
relevant
the
distinction then?
moral distinction Yeah, the moral distinction between a tree and a fetus before 24 weeks is going to be that a fetus has prospective personhood and a tree does not.
But wait, all you said was that it wasn't that about their ability to experience in a personhood way. It's just about their ability to experience in general, in their existence. That's all you said it was. So if it's not about their
Let me
existence,
clarify. I value prospective personhood. My position is dependent upon prospective personhood. So I grant moral consideration to any being with prospective personhood.
yeah,
This includes animals.
sure, okay, so what is personhood in your purview?
Well, it would be better to ask like what being a person is. It would be just like a being with qualitative experiences and some sort of rationality that can be um, observed.
Okay, so you're saying what's important to you is that a being has the capability to eventually have this thing, not whether the being has this thing or not.
Yeah, like it would be wrong. Like if we know that it's in their nature to develop perspective consciousness or consciousness, and they have perspective consciousness, then it would be unjust to deprive them of reaching that point. It would be unjust to deprive them of reaching something that it is in their nature to develop.
Why do we feel that is unjust? Or is it just some intuition?
This is just going to be based off of intuition.
Yeah, so I would say intuitively I feel the opposite, right? So when it comes to a creature having the ability for potential personhood, right? I don't view this as we're now not looking at the creature. We're not looking at what the creature has. We're looking at a what's the word I'm looking for? We're looking at the potential for a concept. And I can take that potential for a concept back as far as I want to. Technically, when I enter a woman without proper protection, there is now the potential for human personhood. I can go as far back as that if I want to. If all we're
No, no, I would disagree.
Why?
I would say that a necessary condition for personhood is you have to be an individual being.
But we're not talking about what the beings have. We're talking about the potential for this thing to arise. Personhood can arise
Yeah,
by just two
and a
people having sex.
qualifier for this is going to be an individual being. Like, if you are not an individual being, then you don't meet the necessary conditions for this to arise.
But okay, so hold on. But all we're talking about is, does this action lead to this thing possibly existing? Yes or no?
Does this action lead to this? I'm not sure where an action
does
came
action
in.
X, right? People having sex, could this lead to personhood showing up in the future? Just in any relevant sense, could this lead to personhood existing? The answer is yes. It could.
Yes.
Great. So how far back in the chain do we take this? You're saying we only take it to the individual. However, if the action can also lead to personhood, how far back are we taking it?
Well, what I'm saying is like it's wrong to divide. It is wrong to deprive an individual being of their personhood. I would say at the moment of conception that it is in their nature to have personhood, and to take an action that deprives this being of reaching their personhood would be unjust. Like you are depriving them of something that they should be entitled to.
Sure. How are you defining individual?
Individual, just like separate in DNA. So like in this context, it's just gonna be like a being that is unique and whole, that is separate in the context of genetic coding.
Okay, so the only way we're defining this is separate in DNA. Do you know at what point like DNA starts forming in utero and like, or I won't even say forming. Are we talking about the minute that the DNA code starts being written? Or are we saying it has to be like fully written out genetic code? Because that doesn't happen immediately.
Yeah, I'm gonna say the moment that it begins to start to develop.
Okay, so the moment, even though that genetic code might not yet be unique because it hasn't been written yet, but the moment genetic code starts being written, that's when we should value it as an individual.
Yep.
Even though it's not yet unique genetic code, like you said, would be the qualifier.
It would be unique in its own way, regardless of the
What
fact that it is not fully
what
developed. It would still be unique.
what's unique about it?
It is going to be separate from any other individual being.
We don't know that yet because it hasn't been written yet.
Oh, well, if it's in the process of being written, even if it's not fully written, then it's still unique by itself.
How?
What do you mean how? It is going
What?
to be separate from any other individual being. The
It's going to
genetic
be
coding that has
separate
been
from any
written is
other
going to be
individual
separate.
being. So when you're saying unique, you're just saying it has to have genes that are separate from another human's genes.
Yep.
Okay, so even though it's not complete, it's okay if it's incomplete genes, but as long as those genes are separate from another human's genes, then it is a considered an individual.
Yeah, I would say so. I would say that makes sense. Yeah.
I would just place that on sperm. Sperm is sperm is not complete set of genetics. It's a partial set of genetics, and it's different. It's separate from the being that it comes out of. Why would this not
But
be
it's not a being in itself. But it's not a being in and of itself.
But we didn't want to talk about beings. We're talking about individuals. The qualifier that you gave for individuals is going to be the same qualifier I would place on the sperm. I'm just taking that qualifier.
Oh, no. So when I say individual, I actually did clarify like an individual being, a being that is separate from all others.
A being. Okay, so how are we defining being?
I think you're asking me. I think I just said like.
No, I asked you about individual.
It's just going to be like an entity that exists separate from all others.
Sperm is an entity that exists separate from all others.
No, it is going to be. It's actually not a being. It doesn't. It's not genetically whole. It's not an organism.
Yeah, but we wait. Genetically whole, right, isn't going to be a fetus either until the genetic code is finished, right? The blueprints take a while to like compile your genes and choose your genes and do all this, right? So like those genes have to be developed. So we already went through that. It doesn't matter about genetic wholeness. It's about whether or not it has partial DNA and whether that partial DNA is now separate from another being. I would say this still constitutes sperm.
What do you mean by separate from another being? Because I would say that the sperm is going to be. I would say that I don't really understand what you're saying because it's still not an organism. It's still not like I don't grant rights to haploid cells that contain half the genetic material necessary for an organism. I grant rights to beings, organisms.
Well, I'm using being under the purview that you gave me, which was just something that's separate from another thing. That was what you said when I asked you what beings were.
Okay, well, let me clarify. When I say being,
Sure.
I'm specifically referring to an organism.
Okay. So a being has to be an organism.
Yep, it has to be a unique individual, a unique genetically whole individual organism.
Okay, what makes something what's the qualifier for organism? Like what makes something an organism other than it just being an individual plant, animal, or single cell life?
I'd have to go check really fast and see like what the qualifiers for being an individual organism would be. But I just think like meeting the 7 qualifiers of life is going to be one of those qualifiers.
Okay, so as long as you meet all 7 of the qualifiers, or just like a few?
It's going to have to be all 7 of them.
Okay, I don't think a fetus would meet all 7 qualifiers though.
Oh wait, no, biologically it does.
I would disagree.
Do you know what the 7 qualifiers of life are?
Yeah, the 7 characteristics are going to be the ability to reproduce, growth and development, energy use, homeostasis, response to environment, and the ability to adapt. I would say the fetuses do not maintain homeostasis. Their homeostasis is maintained by the pregnant person. They're not able to self-regulate.
From what I know, they do meet the 7 qualifiers of life.
But they cannot maintain homeostasis. They cannot self-regulate. Their homeostasis has to be regulated by the pregnant person.
I'm not sure if this is going to negate that necessarily.
I mean, it would if we're going under what you said about it having to meet all 7 qualifications of the characteristics of life.
Yeah, just because like one of the qualifiers is going to be regulated by the mother doesn't mean that it's not engaging within like this qualifier. The qualifier is still being met.
Well, no, the qualifier is only met because it's quote unquote on life support, right? It's
This
not
doesn't matter
able
to
to.
me.
Homeostasis means that you're able, a being is able to, independent of other elements, right? Independent of other elements, able to regulate its internal system. So specifically, like internal temperature. What are the other ones in homeostasis? Internal temperature is one of them. I know that that's one of them. So like if it can't do it, if it cannot self-regulate these processes, then it is not engaging in homeostasis.
Um, yeah, I'm not entirely convinced of this claim. I would say like just because the fetus is depending upon the mother for this to occur doesn't mean that this isn't meeting this qualifier. Like you could say the same thing for the baby outside of the womb. They wouldn't be able to meet this qualifier if you didn't, nurture it in the way that it was necessary. Like if you didn't
What
provide the certain things, it would pass
wait,
away.
wait, what internal systems can't a baby outside of the womb self-regulate?
Repeat the question.
What internal systems cannot be self-regulated by a baby outside of the womb?
Any of them if you don't feed them.
Wait, so now we're saying you can't. Now we're saying if you don't feed something, it can't maintain homeostasis. That's not true. It just can't eat. It's just not
Well,
eating. It's just not getting nutrition.
if you don't provide the necessary resources, then yeah, in the same way that like the fetus is dependent upon the mother for you to provide the resources for this to occur, the baby outside of the womb is going to be
Wait,
dependent upon these resources
no,
for
I'm
this
not
to
saying
occur.
the mother is providing resources. I'm saying the mother is doing the self-regulation. Right? It's not self-regulating. The mother's body is what's regulating the fetus. So for instance, the temperature of the fetus, the internal temperature of the fetus is not being regulated by the fetus itself. It's being regulated by the mother.
Do you have like a scientific study that shows this to be true?
Shows that fetuses can't regulate internal temperature? Sure.
Like I don't I'm not sure if this is I don't really think that this negates I don't I don't really think that this is going to negate this being true, like that the fetus is capable of homeostasis.
Yeah, so in utero, if a mother's umbilical cord is disconnected in utero, the fetus's internal temperature will rise and the fetus will pass because it can't regulate that. When the umbilical cord is connected, right? The umbilical cord is what keeps the fetus's temperature at the same constant temperature as the mother's. This is what I mean by it cannot maintain its regulatory processes by itself.
Okay, well, I don't think that it needs to be doing it by itself for it to be homeostasis.
Yeah, I'm just gonna say it seems like the goalpost keeps moving. Then
I
I feel like the
mean,
goalpost has
fair.
shifted. Like that's not what
That's
homeostasis is.
that's that's fine. That yeah, no, that's fine. I just know that at the moment of conception that the fetus meets all 7 qualifiers. I just know this to be true, and so
Based on what?
based off of what? Based off of the fact that it's an organism.
But you're saying it's an organ. That's a circular answer. You're saying an organism is something that meets these 7 qualifiers, and this meets the 7 qualifiers because it's an organism.
I mean, yeah.
That's a circular answer.
Yeah, so an individual organism meets all of these 7 qualifiers, and we know that it is an organism, therefore it meets all of the qualifiers.
That's a circle. That's not telling me
It's
why.
true,
That's
though.
not telling me.
It's true.
No, that's not telling me how it meets these individual qualifiers. Right? Like I gave you
Oh,
one
I
of the
don't know. I would have
qualifiers that
to.
it doesn't meet.
Yeah, I would have to do a little bit more research on every single one of the qualifiers, and I would have to write how it meets each of these, but I know that it does.
Well, I would say it meets some of them, but it again cannot self-regulate. It needs to be. If a fetus could self-regulate, by the way, here's the real simple answer. If a fetus could maintain homeostasis, it wouldn't need to be in a mother to grow. It wouldn't need to be in someone's womb to grow if it could self-regulate and maintain its own homeostasis. But it can't.
if the fetus didn't meet the qualifier for homeostasis, or if it didn't meet a certain qualifier for the 7 qualifiers of life, then it wouldn't be considered an individual organism. This is how I know that it does meet this.
Well, wait. I would say some people disagree about calling it an individual organism until it can maintain these things. All right.
And then I would just
Then I
pull
would
up
say it
a
qualifies then.
scientific study. Yeah, but then I have multiple scientific studies that say otherwise. Like the NIH saying that it's an individual organism. You've got Lozier Institution. Got another one.
Well, yeah, but here's the difference. These aren't making the same claims you are, right? They define an individual organism as just any organism of a species, right? That's how they're defining it. That's how they're defining an individual organism. Just any organism of a species, right? And they're saying it in an organism in definition is just an individual animal, plant, or single-celled life form. Under this purview, yeah, I could say that a fetus is an organism, but so would sperm be under this definition. But you said specifically that in order for it to be an individual organism, it has to meet the 7 qualifiers of life. Even though I would argue that organisms don't need to meet this, right? A dead human body is still an organism. It's just not currently alive, right? But you said in order to be an organism, you have to meet. Yeah, but you said that it does to be an organism. The whole conversation is that I think sperm is an individual organism. You said no because it doesn't meet the qualifiers, but a fetus also doesn't meet the qualifiers. If you're changing that an individual organism is just any animal, plant, or single-celled thing, then again, sperm is going to meet this qualifier. Sperm are single-celled organisms.
I mean, a quick Google search and the yeah, you can just see that sperm cells are not known to be living complete organisms versus.
Wait, they're not complete organisms, they're incomplete organisms, but that would still make them organisms. They're just an incomplete organism. There are some insects that are incomplete organisms.
I'm looking up right now. I'm trying to see if I can find a source that says that a sperm is an organism or not.
Well, I mean, I don't think it matters much what like a source says, right? Like scientists saying like it's an organism or not doesn't really matter in the purview of like how we're engaging in this conversation, right? Like if we want to just default to what science says, sure. But I would say if we're just defaulting to what science says, then I would say it doesn't matter whether something has the potential for something because science doesn't care about potential. Science cares about capacity.
Well, science doesn't really make philosophical positions on things. It just, says straight up what things are and what they aren't.
I know.
And
I agree.
Yeah, and I would just say that a sperm doesn't have what I value, and therefore I wouldn't grant it moral consideration.
Sure, but we're arguing about the validity of our different claims on whether or not it should have moral consideration. And I think that under the purview of what you've claimed, something needs to have moral consideration, that we can push moral consideration to sperm based on the qualifiers you've laid out. If we want to change those qualifiers, I'm fine with that. But per the qualifiers you laid out, sperm meets your necessary conditions.
I would disagree. I don't think sperm has prospective consciousness or prospective personhood. A sperm will never be a person.
Yes, if met with the right conditions, yes, it will.
Wait, no, it won't.
Yes, it will.
There's a chemical and biological change that occurs when the two haploid cells come together to create a diploid cell. It's no longer sperm.
Yes, there are chemical biological changes when a blastocyst turns into an embryo. What?
Yes. But it doesn't change like the fundamental. What's the word? What it is made of. It is still the same being. It is still genetically whole at that moment.
Wait, but it's not
like there may
because
be changes.
Wait, but we've already proved it's not genetically whole yet. We already know this to be the case because no. When does DNA is like doesn't even begin to be sequenced until hold on, let me pull up the exact time.
No, you may be right. I could be totally wrong, but from what I know, that it begins at the moment of conception is when DNA is created.
The earliest detection of DNA sequencing is 4 weeks and 5 days gestation.
4 weeks and 5 days so this is just the earliest detection. This isn't like when it's created. This is just when we can detect it.
Sure, but if we're having the conversation of how we should implement laws, I would say we need to go off of like what is known, not what is unknown, right? I don't think we should set laws and stand like I would believe that you believe abortion to be immoral, therefore it should be illegal, right? I would say if we're going to make something illegal, right? Everything starts legally. So quite literally, everything in the world is legal, and then we make justifications for why it should be illegal. But if one of those justifications is, well, we just don't know, I wouldn't mark that as illegal from a we just don't know standpoint. You know what I mean?
Well, the thing is like we do know that by 4 weeks that it is necessary for a genetic coding to be present for it to have developed to that point. Like it wouldn't have developed to that point had DNA not been coded into its structure.
I'm sorry, say that again?
Yeah, we know that DNA is necessary for it to have developed to that point. So like it's not like just because we're able to detect it at that point
But no,
doesn't mean it's not present before this point.
we're talking about whether something needs a complete set of DNA to be an individual, right? We've agreed that it doesn't need to be a complete set of DNA per your requirements, and that's why I'm saying sperm meets that condition because it doesn't need to be a complete set of DNA.
No, you're right. I see what you're saying. I agree with you. I would have to do a little bit more research, and I would probably end up taking back what I said about it not being complete. I would say for it to be an individual being, you would need like a complete set of unique DNA.
Yeah, if we're walking back the DNA part, then yeah, I would just say we what's the word I'm looking for? Then sperm meet these. We need new qualifications that exclude sperm.
Yeah, which would be complete DNA, which
But I would say complete DNA
cell isn't.
Yeah, but I would say complete DNA would also exclude fetuses up to a certain point, up until the DNA is done sequencing.
Well, that would only take a matter of, I'm not sure how long it takes, but we know that the fetus, by the time it is to the gestational age of fetus, we know that the DNA is complete. So it would be more so like what?
Sure. So abortion would be moral up until this point.
Well, it wouldn't be an abortion.
Why wouldn't it?
Yeah, because it doesn't take that long for it to be like genetically whole and complete.
Well, if the only time we know it's a fetus is if the only time we know that it's complete is when it's a fetus, that would be at 8 weeks, right? An embryo becomes a fetus at 8 weeks. So if we know at that 8-week mark, it is a fetus now. Everything before 8 weeks would still be an abortion. You can have a 7-week abortion, take the pill, right? So you're just saying that you wouldn't qualify this as an abortion, but it would still be morally okay because we don't know whether it has complete DNA or not.
I don't think. No, I think we do know that we know that it can't grow to that point without a complete DNA code. So, therefore, it would be unjust to unalive them.
Wait, when I'm talking about DNA code, I'm talking about the DNA being sequenced and like the genes being determined and things like that, right? It can have the blueprints, right? It can have the blueprints for DNA, but it hasn't sequenced. Those blueprints haven't been put into any tangible sense yet, right? Anything can have blueprints. The fetus has a part. The sperm has half of those blueprints, right? The sperm has the blueprints as well.
Okay, so when I'm saying it, I just mean I guess in the way that you're referring to it as is just like complete blueprints then.
Okay, so you think something has to have a complete set of blueprints in order for it to be considered an organism?
I believe so. I think that makes sense unless I'm missing something.
Sure. I don't know how we can relevantly say like the blueprints are what's important for it being individual, because the blueprints just say it can have all of these things. Technically, if we want to get technical on the blueprints, with the blueprints existing, the blueprints can make it an exact genetic copy of anybody on the planet. It could be an exact genetic copy of the mother per the blueprints, right? So how would this be? This would be an individual still?
I mean, I guess technically it wouldn't. I guess it would. It could. I guess it wouldn't be individual. I guess if it could be a copy of somebody else's DNA code, then it wouldn't be an individual DNA code.
Okay. Well, then yeah, I would just say we would need to come to we would need a distinction on these things in order to outlaw abortion, right? And even all of this, I say, doesn't come into any relevant sense of like whether a person has a an obligation to this creature. I just don't believe you have an obligation to non-sentient things at the end of the day.
Oh, I mean, yeah, no, that's fair. I just don't think that sentience is like a determining factor of like negating rights, especially when we like caused a being to be in a position and then we're unaliving them for being in a position we caused them to be in.
Wait, I could agree. I could fully agree that you have rights prior to sentience, right? I could say, yeah, sure, you have the right to life prior to sentience, but that doesn't obligate the person carrying you to carry you, right? That doesn't provide them an obligation to maintain that right. Right? I would say the right to life in this sense would be a positive right. That doesn't obligate someone to this positive right. Just because they
Wait, a
even
positive right? I thought it would be a negative right. Wouldn't it be a negative right?
no, because the pregnant person has to do things to keep the fetus alive. They have to physically provide it with things. They have to eat typically more
Well,
calories than what they would eat. So they're overeating their traditional calorie intake to provide calories to the fetus. I mean, I would say in our modern day, to make sure that the fetus is healthy, they have to have prenatal vitamins, they have to do all of this stuff. So they are providing something. So I would say this to be a positive, right? Because if they just did nothing, if a pregnant person only ate enough to sustain themselves, they would lose the fetus.
I would still say this is a negative right. You're just providing like the positive resources necessary for this negative right to, you know,
That
be
that makes it a positive, right?
or not be infringed upon.
That makes it a positive
Sorry,
right.
what?
That makes it a positive right. A negative right, you don't have to do a single thing. A positive right, you do have to do things. So I would say this absolutely
Well,
makes
a
it a
negative
positive right.
right is you don't have to do anything to infringe, or it's like a lack of action for you to be entitled to this right.
No, it's a lack of action to provide the right. So when I say somebody has a right to life, I don't have to do anything. I do nothing, and they maintain their right to life. Positive rights mean that I have to positively engage with them in some way, shape, or form to give them this right. Right. So in order to give them the right, I have to do something. So in some way, I have to do something. The other one is just you don't interfere. You just don't interfere with them. But again, if a woman just doesn't interfere with the fetus in any way, shape, or form, the fetus will die. Like if you were like, okay, I don't have to interfere with the fetus, I'll only eat enough to maintain myself, the fetus dies. You can
Yeah, I've
do
never heard anybody refer to the negative right to life as a positive right. I'll talk to my friends about that. That's interesting.
well, that's just how positive rights and negative rights are deformed. Positive rights are the kind of rights which impose on others a negative duty. Our negative rights impose on people a negative duty. Positive rights impose a positive duty.
Right. No, I see what you're saying. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I would say so. Back to your question of like, why should a woman be obligated? Is what you asked, right? Like, why should she be obligated to this being?
Yeah. I don't
Um,
think you have obligation. I can't think of a single other instance in anywhere in the world where we have a positive right, where we have to provide a positive right to a non-sentient being. I can't think of a single other instance. There could be. Can't think of one.
um, I mean, yeah, no, I can't think of one either, just because of how unique pregnancy and fetal development is going to be. But regardless, I would say, like sentience is just irrelevant under my position. It just doesn't matter. But I would say like you could be causally obligated.
Yeah, I don't believe you can be causally obligated to a non-sentient thing. That's just where the difference lies in us. So, for instance, if I plant a tree, if I take a seed for a tree and I plant that seed into soil, and I put that tree into a room, I have now placed this biological organism into a state of dependency on me in this room. It will only grow if I cause it to grow. If I don't let it grow, I don't believe I've done anything immoral here.
Yeah, no, I would agree with you because I don't. If the tree doesn't, have what I value.
Sure, but all we're talking about right now is an organism, right? The thing that you value is the sentience. That's even though you're saying that's not what I value as it is because it's not until the sentience shows up that you would value this creature, right? If somebody's born brain dead, you're not valuing that body, right? They're born
Because they
brain
don't
dead.
have perspective personhood.
Well, yes, so that's what I'm saying. Non-sentient things, we don't need to give them moral consideration because there's no negative, there's no harm being done if they die. Like there's no harm that's done when a tree dies.
Um, I would say like you're still depriving them of something. I would say you're still depriving them of their future consciousness.
I would just say you can't deprive something that hasn't existed yet. But that would just be semantical on like the word deprive. I would say I can't take something away that it never had. It just never had it.
I would say like not having it, like not having consciousness doesn't mean that it's not entitled to it. Like I would say like you're depriving the being of something that it is entitled to, which is like we know that consciousness is naturally developed or generally.
But again, I disagree that you're taking something away from this thing. It's never had it to begin with, right? If I like it's not even that it's never had it. It doesn't exist yet. These things it does not exist yet. You're saying that, well, it might exist in the future. So because it might exist in the future, we need to value it now. And I just disagree with that I just disagree with that presentation there. I think that that presentation there is just it just illogical to what my brain thinks about. Like it doesn't work in with my intuitions.
No, that's valid. I appreciate the conversation. I think this was a pretty fruitful discussion, so I appreciate you being respectful. I gotta go take care of some stuff, but I appreciate the conversation.
All right, no problem.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too.